Her hands were still shaking when she found the ring. It had rolled under the refrigerator. She saw the gleam of it when she was on her knees scrubbing the kitchen floor, the way diamonds catch light even in the dark places. A gold band set with a stone the size of a thumbnail. She picked it up without thinking, tucked it into her apron pocket, told herself she would put it on the counter where someone would find it. She forgot. She forgot because the housekeeper, Mrs. Albanese, came in at that exact moment and told her the East Corridor needed to be done twice because a guest was arriving tonight. She forgot because her lower back had been screaming since 7 a.m. and she still had 4 hours of the shift left. She forgot because forgetting small things had become how she survived the large ones. What Mia Rossi didn't know, as she stood up from the kitchen floor and pressed her hand against the small of her back, was that the ring had been missing for 4 days, that 3 men had already been questioned about it, that the man who owned this house had not slept properly since the night he noticed it was gone, and that the security camera in the corner of the kitchen had just watched her put it in her pocket. Mia was 31 years old, 5'4", and the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. She had come to work at the Carbone estate 8 months ago through a cleaning agency that paid her €14 an hour and took 4 off the top for their fee. She lived in a 2-room apartment in the Prati neighborhood that cost her €900 a month, money she did not quite have, paid every first of the month by moving sums between accounts in a sequence she had long since memorized. Her mother's nursing home was in Trastevere, €3,200, also every first of the month. The math never worked, and she did it anyway, every time. Because her mother had given up 30 years of working the same math for her, and because some debts are not the kind you calculate, they are the kind you simply carry. She was not unhappy, exactly. She had learned to live in a narrower version of her life and find what was genuine inside it. She brought her own coffee to work in a thermos because the agency didn't cover breaks. She had a small balcony where she kept 3 plants she watered religiously. She had a cat named Aldo who was indifferent to her on principle but slept against her feet every night without fail. And she had decided this was a reasonable version of devotion. She had worked in the Carbone estate for 8 months, and in that time she had seen Ettore Carbone perhaps a dozen times. You did not see him so much as become aware of him. The house changed when he was in it. The air pressure shifted. Men who had frightened her in the first weeks, broad-shouldered men in dark jackets who stood at doorways and said nothing, became careful when he was nearby. Their voices dropped without their seeming to realize it. Mrs. Albanese, who ruled the domestic staff with the quiet absolutism of a medieval abbess, moved differently on the days he was home, more deliberate, more precise, as though everything she did might be observed and graded. Mia had seen Carbone twice at close range, once in the main hallway, walking toward a door held open by 2 of his men. Dark hair gone silver at the temples, a suit that cost more than her rent, eyes that swept across the entrance hall in a single efficient movement, cataloging everything, and then he was through the door, and she was left with the impression of someone who moved like he had already decided what everything in the room weighed. The second time was 3 weeks ago. She had come around a corner carrying folded linens and nearly walked directly into him. He stopped. She stopped. She managed to say "mi scusi" without dropping anything, and he looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her, briefly and completely, and said "prego" and walked on. She had thought about that for 3 days before she successfully stopped. There was a car she had noticed this past week, parked on the far side of the service entrance road, dark gray. Always the same spot. Never there in the morning and always there by 2 p.m. She had mentioned it to Mrs. Albanese, who had told her not to concern herself with what happened outside. She had filed it away. Probably a contractor. Probably nothing. She was finishing the East Corridor at 4:30 when Marco found her. Marco was 8 years old. He was Carbone's son, and he lived in the house full-time, which Mia had learned meant something, because Carbone's older daughter from his first marriage lived in Milan with her mother and visited at Christmas. Marco had his father's dark eyes and his father's quality of stillness, but where the father used stillness as a kind of controlled authority, in the child it read simply as watchfulness, a boy who had learned early to observe carefully before speaking. He appeared at the end of the corridor and watched her fold dust cloths for a moment. "You fold them in thirds," he said. "It fits better in the cart that way." He considered this. "Mrs. Albanese folds them in quarters." "Mrs. Albanese has a different cart." This seemed to satisfy him. He came closer. He was carrying a paperback book, small, battered, a chapter book with a cracked spine that had been opened many times. She had seen it before. It lived on the bookshelf in the small sitting room off the main hall, and she had noticed it when she dusted because it was the only book on the shelf that was actually worn. Everything else looked decorative. This one had been read. "Is that yours?" she asked. "It was my father's." He held it so she could see the cover. The Old Man and the Sea. He stopped on page 47. He started reading it again last month, but he didn't get past 47. She didn't ask why. Something about the way Marco said it made her understand that the why was not a simple thing, and that he knew it too. "What happens on page 47? She asked instead. Marco opened to it. "The fish gets away," he said. "But not really away. He's still connected. He just can't be pulled in yet." Mia looked at the boy. 8 years old. "That's a good way to say it," she said. Marco shrugged, which was precisely his father's gesture, and she had to look back at her dust cloths. "My father has a meeting. He'll be home at 7. Mrs. Albanese says I have to eat dinner at 6. He paused. "I don't like eating alone. I'll be here until 6:30, Mia said. "I can sit with you." He looked at her for a moment with those watchful eyes, and then nodded once. The nod of someone who has taken a practical matter under advisement and reached a decision. He went back down the corridor. She stood there for a moment with the folded dust cloth in her hands, feeling something warm and ordinary and slightly aching. The shape of things she did not have, and had stopped letting herself want. Then she thought of the ring in her apron pocket, and the warmth curdled. The trouble arrived at 5:15, while she was wiping down the kitchen counters before her final walkthrough. His name was Piero Caruso, and she had seen him twice before. He was the ex-husband of someone who worked at the estate's management company, or so she had been told, which was not quite an explanation for why he occasionally appeared in spaces where he should not be. He was the kind of man who had learned that a certain quality of blonde attractiveness could get him through doors that should have stayed closed, and who had used this skill long enough that he had forgotten he was using it. He came through the kitchen service door at 5:15, as though he had every right to be there. "You're the new cleaning girl," he said. "I've worked here for 8 months, Mia said. She kept her voice level. She kept wiping the counter. He leaned against the doorframe. His eyes moved over her in a single sweep that catalogued and dismissed simultaneously. "You're heavier than the last one." She did not respond. She folded the cloth and moved to the next section of counter. "I heard Carboni has a type." He pushed off the doorframe and came further into the room. "I didn't think it was this." He gestured vaguely at her, not at her face or her work, at the space she occupied. "Maybe the cleaning girls are different from the personal company, eh?" She had experienced this before. Not this man, not these exact words, but This dynamic, the way men like this needed her to respond in order to feel they had landed something. Silence was the only answer that did not give them what they wanted. She kept her eyes on the counter. Her face stayed still. Her hands kept moving. "I heard something went missing from the kitchen," he said. "Something valuable." Her hands stopped. He smiled. "The maid went pale," he said, apparently to the room. "Very interesting." He took out his phone. "I wonder what the boss would think, knowing what's in his cleaning girl's pocket right now." The thing she felt was cold and specific. Not panic. She had spent enough of her life in situations where panic was a luxury she couldn't afford, but it was close to panic's border, and she was aware of it the way you're aware of a drop-off in fog. You can't see the edge, but you know it's there. "You have something that belongs to this house," Caruso said. "And I think we can come to an arrangement about how that gets resolved quietly." He stepped toward her. "Or not quietly. Your choice." Her choice about what, exactly? The voice came from the doorway behind Caruso. Ettore Carbone was not a large man, particularly medium height. Controlled build. He stood in the kitchen doorway in his suit jacket and looked at Piero Caruso the way a surveyor looks at a property line, with the calm precision of someone establishing what belongs where. Caruso turned. For a moment, nothing moved in his face. Then something did. A rearrangement, a calculation. The thing that happens when a man realizes the distance he has traveled from safety is longer than he thought. "Ettore," Caruso said. I heard what you were doing." Carbone's voice had not changed in volume or temperature. "You were in my kitchen. You were speaking to my employee. You were making an offer to resolve a situation that doesn't concern you." He walked into the kitchen. Caruso stepped back without seeming to mean to. "There are at least 4 things wrong with your being here. If you'd like, I can go through them in order." "The ring," Caruso said. You thought you had found a situation you could use." Carbone stopped. "You thought the distance between this kitchen and my office was enough room to work in. You were wrong about the distance." He looked at Mia for the first time. Direct, brief, complete. "Go to the sitting room. Marco is waiting for dinner." She should have said something. She didn't. She took her hands off the counter, straightened her back, walked past both of them into the corridor without looking at either of their faces. Behind her, Carbone said, very quietly, "Close the door, Piero." She heard the door close. She ate dinner with Marco at the kitchen table, a different kitchen, the small one off the family corridor that the staff used. She served him the pasta Mrs. Albanese had left covered on the stove and poured herself a glass of water and sat across from him. He told her about a documentary he had watched about deep-sea fish, the ones that live so far down that they generate their own light because no other light reaches them. "They don't know what sunlight is," he said, "but they're not in the dark." "Bioluminescence," Mia said. "You know the word. I studied nursing for 2 years before I had to stop." Marco wound pasta around his fork. "Why did you stop?" "Life changed direction," she said, which was the true answer and also the short one. He accepted this. "Then, my father knows things about people. He always has. He knew our neighbor was sick before our neighbor told anyone." He paused. "He noticed you before you noticed him noticing." Mia looked at her water glass. "He told me." Marco said simply. He said, "The woman in the blue apron folds things differently than the others." He said it like it meant something. She didn't know what to do with that, so she didn't do anything with it. She served Marco the second portion he pointed at, and they talked about deep sea fish until 6:30, when she collected her bag from the staff room and let herself out through the service entrance. The gray car that had been parked across the service road for a week was not there. She stood for a moment looking at the empty space, feeling the specific weight of an absence she had only half registered as a presence. Then she walked home. She was 3 minutes from the estate when her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize, a Rome exchange. "There's a process," Carbone said, without preamble. "When someone in my house finds something that doesn't belong to them, there's a place to put it. Mrs. Albanese handles it." Mia stopped walking. "You found the ring in the kitchen," he said. "Probably under the refrigerator. It rolls every time someone mops too vigorously, and Mrs. Albanese has never once acknowledged that the angle of the kitchen floor is the problem." "I forgot I had it," Mia said. "I should have." "You were told to redo the east corridor. You had 4 hours left in your shift." A pause. "There are 15 people with access to that kitchen. You were the only one who thought to look under the refrigerator. The others just told me they hadn't seen it." She didn't know what to say. "It's my mother's ring," he said. "She's been dead for 11 years. "It doesn't," he stopped. "Start it again, it matters." "I'm sorry," Mia said. "About your mother." The line was quiet for a moment. "Caruso won't be back," he said. "He won't contact you. If anything changes, call this number." He said it without explaining what authority he had over what Caruso would or wouldn't do, which was its own kind of explanation. "The ring is still in my apron pocket," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't. Bring it tomorrow." Another pause. This one longer. "You told Marco why you stopped nursing?" he asked. "He doesn't usually ask," Carbone said. "He usually waits." She was standing in the middle of the sidewalk in the dark, her bag on her shoulder, a city moving around her. And she was talking to a man she had stood next to twice at close range in 8 months, and she did not know what this was or what it meant. She only knew that she was not performing steadiness right now, that her voice was coming out as its own thing, without her managing it. "He said something about deep-sea fish," she offered. "He says that to everyone." But the way he said it was not dismissive. It was the way you talk about something you are privately fond of. "He's working up to the one about the jellyfish. They have no brain. They've been alive for 600 million years. He finds this philosophically relevant." She laughed. It surprised her. A real one, short and involuntary. A pause. "Then, are you all right? After what happened with Caruso?" "Yes," she said. And then, because it was 10 p.m., and she was tired and she had stopped performing, "I've been spoken to worse. By people with less reason to think they could get away with it." Something shifted in the quality of the silence on the line. "I know," he said, and she understood he meant he actually knew, that he had looked, or been told, or simply had that quality she had heard attributed to him, the capacity to register things before they were offered. "Good night," he said. "Good night," Mia said. She stood on the sidewalk for another 30 seconds after the call ended, for no reason she could name, and then she walked home. 3 weeks passed. She brought the ring back the next morning and gave it to Mrs. Albanese, who placed it in a small tray on the office desk without comment. Mia did not see Carbone that day. She cleaned the east corridor, the guest bathrooms, the main staircase. She ate lunch in the staff kitchen. She let herself out at 6. She ate dinner with Marco on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which had become a quiet arrangement without anyone formally arranging it. He was working through a series about ocean ecosystems and updating her on each episode with the methodical precision of a scientist issuing reports. She listened. She brought him a book about bioluminescence she found in a second-hand shop near her apartment. He received it with the gravity of someone accepting a significant gift and immediately read 40 pages before dinner was finished. She saw Carbone on a Thursday, 3 weeks in. She was coming down the main staircase with cleaning supplies, and he was at the bottom, looking at his phone. He looked up. She kept walking. When she reached the bottom step, she said, "Good evening," and he said, "Good evening," and she kept walking. She was in the supply room when she noticed she was smiling. She stopped smiling. She organized cleaning supplies with focused attention. She reminded herself, with the particular efficiency of a woman who has learned to manage herself, 31 years old. 14 euros an hour before deductions, nursing home payments, 1 cat. This is the life. It is a reasonable life. Do not build something in your head that will cost more than you can afford to pay for it. It helped. Mostly, the things she had not wanted to think about happened on a Friday. She had her former sister-in-law's number still, which told her everything about her own judgment and the particular stubbornness of not deleting things you should delete. Giulia called her at noon on a Friday, when Mia was on her lunch break, eating in the staff courtyard. Giulia still lived near Mia's ex-husband and still occasionally delivered his messages, which Mia had never asked her to do and never found a way to stop. "Ennio is engaged," Giulia said. "I thought you should know." "Congratulations to Ennio," Mia said. "He's been talking to people." Giulia hesitated. "About the divorce settlement. He's saying you still owe him the original amount, plus legal fees. He has a new lawyer. The original amount was 42,000 euros. Ennio had decided, at some point in the 6 years of their marriage and the 2 of the divorce proceedings, that Mia was responsible for the failure of his business import operation, on the grounds that she had failed to support it with sufficient optimism. His lawyer had made this argument in writing. The judge had dismissed it. Ennio had filed an appeal. The appeal was dismissed. Ennio had apparently decided that new lawyer meant new outcome. "He can't do anything with that," Mia said, calmly, in the courtyard in the sun. "It's settled." "He says he has something," Giulia said. "Evidence," he called it. "Something you did that could reopen." "There isn't anything," Mia said. "There's nothing to reopen." But she felt it as she said it, the specific cold certainty that Ennio had found something he thought he could use. Probably something small. Probably nothing. Probably just enough to cost her 6 more months of legal fees she didn't have. Because that was how Ennio had always operated. Not by winning, but by making the cost of defending yourself exceed what you could pay. She finished her lunch. She went back to work. She didn't hear the name Ennio Rossi spoken aloud by anyone other than herself for the next 10 days. Then Marco, on a Thursday, looked up from his bioluminescence book at the dinner table and said, very casually, "My father says divorce lawyers who file harassment claims against settled proceedings have their bar association registrations reviewed." Mia looked up from her pasta. "He said it on the phone," Marco added. "Yesterday he didn't know I was in the room. He went back to his book. The jellyfish thing is in chapter 4, by the way. No brain, 600 million years. I told you." She looked at the boy for a long moment. The boy did not look up. She ate her dinner. She said nothing about it. She thought about the gray car that had disappeared from the service road. She thought about Caruso not coming back. She thought about the quality of information that Carbone seemed to have already, always, before she had offered it. She thought about a ring that rolled under a refrigerator 11 years after its owner died, and had somehow waited 8 months for someone who would actually look. She was in the supply room the following Monday when the door opened, and it was not Mrs. Albanese. The nursing program at Sapienza has an evening track, Carbone said. He was standing in the doorway in his jacket, holding what appeared to be a printed course schedule. 3 evenings a week. The program accepts prior course credit. You'd have roughly 14 months left to complete the degree, assuming the credit transfer is accepted, which I'm told is standard. Mia stood in the supply room holding a bottle of surface cleaner and looked at him. "I had someone look into it," he said. "You had someone look into my nursing credits." He seemed to consider whether this was a problem. "Yes." She put the cleaner on the shelf. She stopped. She looked at him directly. "That's quite a thing to do without asking." "It is," he said. "I'm asking now." The supply room was small. He was still in the doorway, which she understood was a kind of courtesy, not filling the space, not pressing the argument. She had seen him fill rooms before. This was not that. "Why?" she asked. "Because you stopped on page 47, he said, "and the fish is still connected." She stared at him. "My son talks," he said, very slightly. "About things and about people. He makes distinctions I trust." He put the course schedule on the supply shelf beside her. "You don't have to decide now. But I'd like you to look at it." She looked at the printed schedule. She looked at him. "The fees," she said. "Handled, I don't want. There's a property management trust that handles educational costs for long-term household staff," he said. It was said as a flat fact, delivered at the same temperature as everything else he said, and she understood immediately that the trust had been created sometime in the last 2 weeks and would contain exactly 1 file. She understood this and felt something move in her chest. Something that was not gratitude and was not obligation. Something simpler and harder to name. "Why does it matter," she said, "what I was before I came here?" He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that is not absence, but presence. "Because you fold things in thirds," he said. "Because you sat with my son every Tuesday and Thursday without anyone asking you to. Because you found something under a refrigerator that 7 people had looked around and not found, and you put it in your pocket to keep it safe, and then forgot it. Because you were exhausted, and you still had 4 hours left of a job you do perfectly." He looked at her steadily. "Because you said, 'I've been spoken to worse.' And I have been thinking about that sentence since you said it." Mia stood in the supply room in her blue apron and held very still. She had spent the better part of 2 years in this narrow version of her life, and she had become expert at its management. She knew how not to want things. She had gotten quite good at it. "Okay," she said. He nodded once, the nod of someone who has taken a practical matter under advisement and reached a decision, and she recognized it, belatedly, as the same nod his son used, which meant the son had learned it from somewhere. He started to leave. "The ring," she said. "Your mother's. What happened to her?" He stopped in the doorway. A pause that was not reluctance. It was the pause of someone deciding what to say to someone they have decided to speak to, honestly. "She worked very hard," he said. "Her whole life. She was the kind of person who never stopped. She did not know how." He looked back at her over his shoulder. "She would have liked you." He left. Mia stood in the supply room for a full minute without moving. Then she picked up the course schedule and looked at it. 3 evenings a week. The credit transfer criteria. The application deadline that was 6 weeks away. She folded it in thirds. What happened to Ennio Rossi happened quietly and completely. His new attorney filed a motion on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, the firm's managing partner received a regulatory inquiry from the Bar Association regarding 3 of the firm's previous cases. On Thursday, the attorney withdrew from the Rossi matter due to a scheduling conflict that did not exist. On Friday, Ennio received a letter from an accounting firm he did not know. auditing a business transfer from 4 years ago, in which he had significantly undervalued certain assets. The letter was addressed with the specific precision of people who know exactly what they are looking for. Ennio called Julia. Julia called Mia. "Whatever you did," Julia said. "He's not calling anymore." "I didn't do anything," Mia said. This was true in the technical sense. She had not made a call or sent an email or asked for anything. She had eaten dinner with an 8-year-old boy on Tuesday and Thursday. That was the full extent of her actions. She thought about Carbone's code, the things he said to her directly, and the things he demonstrated without saying. "She works in my house. That means she's under my protection." He had never said those exact words. He hadn't needed to. She applied to the nursing program on a Sunday morning at her kitchen table, with Aldo asleep on the chair beside her and 3 plants on the balcony catching the early light. The application took 40 minutes. The credit transfer form took another 20. She submitted it at 10:15 and made herself coffee and stood on the balcony and looked at the city. She did not feel rescued. She felt, and she examined this carefully, the way you examine something you want to understand before you trust it. She felt like someone who had been doing the right things in a space too small for them, and the space had simply expanded. Not changed. Expanded, that was the difference. On the last Monday of the month, Carbone found her in the East Corridor. The transfer was approved, he said. 14 months, 3 evenings. "I know. I got the letter Saturday." He nodded. She kept folding linens. "Thank you," she said, not as a courtesy. Genuinely, he was quiet for a moment. "Do you always work this hard?" She looked up. He was looking at her in the way he had in the hallway months ago. Direct, complete, nothing performed in it. "Yes," she said. "Is that a problem?" "No," he said. "I was asking because I was curious." She held the folded linen. "Does it happen often," she said, "that you're curious?" The corner of his mouth moved. Barely, but it moved. "No," he said, "it doesn't." She looked back at her linens. She was smiling, and she was not managing it, and she did not try. Later, Mia would think about the night she found the ring and what it had started, and she would understand that the thing that had started was not, had never been, about a ring. It was about a woman who stayed on her hands and knees long enough to see what was under the refrigerator. It was about a man who noticed the way she folded things when no one was watching. It was about a boy with his father's eyes who had read the same 47 pages over and over and understood without being told that the fish was still connected, still there, just not yet pulled in. The estate was quiet at 7 in the morning. The city was outside, doing what cities do. All that noise and motion and money and consequence. In the kitchen, the refrigerator still sat at its slight angle, and the floor still sloped imperceptibly toward the east wall, and Mrs. Albanese still folded linens in quarters because she had a different cart. And Mia Rossi stood at the counter with her thermos of coffee and looked out the window at a garden that was still cold with February, where a single light was on in the study above, and where a boy was probably already awake reading about jellyfish that had lived for 600 million years without a brain, finding their own light in the dark. She was going to be a nurse. She was going to do it in 14 months, 3 evenings a week, and she was going to be very good at it because she had always been very good at it and had simply been waiting for the space. She poured her coffee. She folded her napkin in thirds. She stayed. If Mia reminded you of anyone, the kind of quiet you recognize as strength only after, tell me in the comments. Was it the ring or the 47 pages that first made you understand what this story was actually about? I read every one. And if you want to know what Marco figures out about his father in the spring, before his father does, follow along. There's a new one every day.